Hey everybody. This week in our Master Gardener class, we talked about soils. And I thought the easiest way to cover this material is if I just sit down with my book and flip through and, as promised, give you an overview on what was taught throughout the course. Again, it's important for you to understand that your Master Gardener program is going to focus on soils that are applicable to your area. So some of my information is general, but I might touch on some things that are specific to Mississippi. So what did we really learn about when it comes to soils? Well, we talked about the soil map that's been outlaid for our state by the United States Geological Service, and talked about the different kinds of soils that are out there. We talked about alluvium soils, soils that are moved in by water, and we talked about the loess soils, those that are wind blown. Mississippi has both of those. We have loess soils that were blown in over from Texas, and we also have the alluvial soils that are deposited along the Mississippi Delta. We talked about how there are 250 approximate different soils throughout the state of Mississippi. That's quite an amazing thing to think about, just how many different types of soil there are. But when you think about all the different components that go into soil, it's pretty easy to understand why there would be such a great difference. We talked about the organic materials and the horizon that's a part of the soil makeup. And we talked about the properties of soil. We talked about how color of soil can be a very important indicator. The texture, the horizon or different layers in the soil, the pH of soil, and many other different components as well. We learned about the difference between soil structure and soil texture. We learned that soil texture is the actual ratio between sand, silt, and clay, but that the structure is how those particles are actually connected to each other. One neat little thing that we learned about in here was how you could do a field test to get a general idea for what kind of soil is in a particular area. They told us to take about a golf ball size worth of soil that is wet enough that you can form it into a ball, and then to pull that soil apart and you can assess it. They told us that if it doesn't form a ribbon, then we know it's a sandy soil. If it forms a very short ribbon, about a half an inch long before it breaks, then it's a loamy soil. But if it goes over a half an inch long, it has more clay content. It's a clayey soil. It's a very rudimentary way to understand what the general soil is in an area. Probably the thing that impressed me most about this class is that we talked a lot about organic matter, and you're going to see this topic repeated throughout the rest of the course. We learned a lot of respect for how organic matter needs to be in the soil and the troubles that we have with that throughout various places here in our state. To give you some ideas of what was emphasized, we talked about organic matter enhancing the development of soil aggregates. We learned about how it increases pore space, how it increases the infiltration and percolation rates, how it increases water holding capacity, and also nutrient capacity and the release of nutrients, how it improves nutrient storage, how it improves the cultivation ease or tilth of the soil, and of course how it promotes further biological activity. And those are just the talking points. There's a lot of information that was explained to us inside of those. Another part that impressed me is when we got over to talking about improving soil health, we didn't immediately jump into any sort of chemical additions or additions that are man-made. The first thing we talked about was we have to improve the organic matter inside of the soil before we try to move forward into any other sort of approach. To be clear, organic matter was stressed quite significantly in the course, and that has a pretty strong tie for how I feel about the soil, how I feel about increasing soil health in order to increase plant nutrition. That said, we did speak about soil pH and the nutrient availability at different pHs and how different crops and different plants need a certain pH to have the right minerals available to them. And because of that, we did touch on how we can amend soil in order to change the pH to suit our needs so that we can grow a particular crop or whatever we're looking to do. Again, we focused on how that can be accomplished without having to go down to the store and make changes. We talked about the pros and cons of wood ash and other things on making changes to the pH. In talking about the different macro, secondary, and micro elements that are available, one number that sort of sticks out was they said 17 out of 18 essential elements are available or not available because of pH. That the pH has to be correct for the nutrients to find its way into the plant, or the plant can't take it up. 17 out of 18 nutrients. That's clearly something we need to pay attention to. And because we need to pay attention to the pH, we did spend a good amount of time talking about the need to do soil testing. That it was better to do a soil test up front so we know what we're reacting to than just generally even applying organic matter to soil and not knowing what we're really trying to achieve. Now, if you live in the United States, then you might already be familiar with your extension service offering soil testing. But you might also need to be aware that you can send off your soil samples to other companies and have your soil tested by them for a more detailed result. What do I mean by more detailed? Well, something that was interesting to me is that here in Mississippi, the state lab does not test for nitrogen. Let that sink in for a second. The reason we were given is because nitrogen turns over too quickly in our hot and humid climate. Instead, they provide general recommendations that are based on years of experience and knowledge and testing that's been done in the past. So they're not going to say you have X amount of nitrogen in your soil, you need to provide X amount of nitrogen over the course of your growing season. They're just going to say if that's the crop you're looking to grow, then provide this amount of nitrogen. It's an interesting approach, and I'm not sure if it's the best way I would want to have a test presented to me. One other point that I would not have thought to take into account, so I want to spread it to you, is in doing a soil test, they told us do not use galvanized metal buckets. It affects the test, so take that into account when you're collecting a soil sample for yourself. The rest of the course about soils was about if you are applying fertilizers, how to apply them properly to make sure that you're not over fertilizing, so that you're not creating a situation where fertilizer runs off or where you build up too much of a particular nutrient in your soil, etc. I'm going to skip over that just because it's a lot of detail and it's not something that I'm interested in promoting. So with that is our overview on soils in the Master Gardener program. I learned a lot from here, but my favorite thing was taking away how you could do that in-field soil test. It's something that I'm going to keep tucked away in the back of my mind so that when I go on sites to do permaculture design and they've never had a soil test done before, I know that if I just have a little trowel and a bit of water, I can get down in the soil and give myself an idea for what's actually there on the property and not just have to look at a statewide map and make a good guess at what might be there. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.